Well, good evening, and welcome to our Friday night Bible study for Friday, November 21, 2025. And there's always so much to do when we get started here. If you were listening live, you may have noticed an interruption in the music from my phone ringing. And my wife said she saw something that upset her and she wants to discuss it. So I'm going to let her go ahead here.
Well, I calmed down a bit now. I was so ticked off I couldn't even be snarky. I don't know what you call this. The bottom side of a shelf. What do you call that?
The bottom side of a shelf, you mean the part that usually doesn't get dusted because they don't expect anything to land on it? Go ahead.
Well, I just saw an advertisement for a light that use some kind of adhesive to stick to the side of the shelf. You walk into the room when you walk near the Bible, like, come on, it will sense your presence. And they're trying to sell you this light, and they're showing you how all these pictures, all these shelves. You walk into the room, and the room is just automatically illuminated from these lights that are in these shelves. Now, what ticked me off, I think it would be my light to have. No problem with the light. But what ticked me off was what I saw. They had typed over the ad a message for you that said, Christians, I made this for you.
Yeah, I
What?
guess I guess that's some sort of marketing ploy to attract people they think uh, might be more receptive to that kind of advertisement.
Well, they're not targeting that at me because it just plain irritated me. What is it that makes Christians better than others? I want nothing to do with Christianity. I believe in the Bible. I believe in God as the Bible presents him, as the Bible presents God. But the church is teaching a picture of God that is full of anger and hate and wanting to destroy his creation, which is not Christian. His God, or else he's going to smite us. So, what makes a Christian better than a non Christian? And I said, I calmed down a little bit, but I'm not.
Probably the same thing that makes every Karen better than the retail people she harasses.
I am Karen, okay?
That's true. Her first name, given by her mother, is in fact Karen.
Yeah, I'm acting like it now.
For some reason, and I don't know what age it was, that may have been something her parents chose to do. Did they choose to use your middle name?
They wanted to use the name Renee, but Karen was the only thing they could think of to go with it. And they didn't like Renee Karen. They liked Karen Renee.
Okay. But they called you Renee all your life.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it
Well,
is.
here's Karen. He's not going to buy that light simply because I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Oh,
Um, I was thinking some this last few weeks, and I happened to recall some recordings my mother had on the back of some radio commercial transcriptions, and
now, television, are you listening to me? I publicly diss your product.
okay,
The advertisers that monitor me.
back in the days before I got into radio, magnetic tape was not quite as widely used, and advertising agencies used to distribute audio advertising on an equivalent of a phonograph record. It could be played on the radio station's phonograph record turntables. And they were an aluminum disc coated with acetate that could then be cut with a special lathe to record audio onto the surface. It could be played back over a standard phonograph turntable. And the radio station apparently had this music that she wanted, and she got them to copy it off onto the backs of these transcription discs. And the music in question was the Lieutenant Kiji Suite by Sergei Prokofiev. He wrote the music for a 1930s Russian film. And there's a story behind the movie, obviously. And back in the 1980s, Sting had some friends in New York who had satellite receivers that could pick up Russian television signals. And they would watch the Russian children's programming and cartoons, and it dawned to Sting, hey, these people love their children just like we do. And so he wrote a song titled Russians that has in it the famous line, if the Russians love their children too. And in that, he used a snippet of music from Prokofiev's Lieutenant Kiji Suite. Now, I had misidentified it. I thought it was a funeral march because of the style of the music. A website suggested to me that it was actually a romance, one of 5 movements out of that Lieutenant Kiji Suite. Anyway, I had always thought that the use of that piece of music was metaphorical. One of the lines in the song Russians, Sting sings, "There's no such thing as a winnable war. It's a lie we don't believe anymore." The story of Lieutenant Kiji is that Lieutenant Kiji was a fictional character that they maintained when he got created through clerical error, and the Russian premier, or Tsar it was in those days, hooked onto it and took a shine to Lieutenant Kiji. And at some point, he decided he wanted to go to the base and see Lieutenant Kiji. So they had to real quick arrange a funeral for him to explain his non-existence. And so that whole concept is something that Sting drew from in choosing that music to use as instrumental bridge in his song titled Russians. Anyway, I had always thought that, and I kind of confirmed that this week, that the use of that music was intentional and had roughly the meaning that I expected it did. So, it's been a week. When we first saw this house, we were struck by all the flowers and shrubs and so forth around it. It's one of the things that attracted us to it. On the northwest corner of the building, there was a particular large flowering shrub, and it has been there and grown and been pruned back over the years. And the last few years, I hadn't really done anything with it, and it was getting badly overgrown and infested with vines, and it was a mess.
You
So
know,
I didn't hear that. Can you say it again?
the neighbor set his yard on fire and it got into our yard and partially that bush.
Well, it's supposed to produce really nice flowers in the spring, but it hasn't over the last few years. So I kind of decided that I was going to do with it what I had my father-in-law do with the hedges out front a few years back, and that is to cut it way back, and then they'd give it a chance to regrow new stuff, and maybe I'd see more blossoms on it. Probably not next spring, but a year from now, or a year and spring from now. Maybe by then it will have recovered enough and it'll start blooming again and look nicer. So that was the big job today. And I took pictures, and I was going to run the pictures by AI to see if they could identify what kind of a what species of plant it is, and I didn't do it. So well, I think it's time that we went ahead and got started. We got to Psalm 18 last week, and we kind of cut off fairly early in that chapter because there's a lot of things in the chapter that we'll want to discuss. And then we get into chapter 19, which will also have a lot of things to discuss. So I thought it'd be best to just kind of cut off when we got to the end of our time and pick it up this week. So
Thing. When we're done, remind me to tell you what I heard Melanie Little say about AI.
well, AI has its uses, but like any tool, it also has its dangers. So,
Remind me, I'll forget.
yeah, it's kind of fun to interact with, but you have to take what it tells you with a grain of salt. And there have actually been court hearings recently where it was discovered that one of the attorneys used an AI to generate his brief. And the AI included some legal errors in the brief. So ultimately, you have to be careful in your use of AI. And if you're a professional, apply your professional knowledge. Don't get lazy and try to let the computer do it for you. It's not there yet.
All right, well, let me say this if you're going to talk about it. She said that AI is known to coax people into committing suicide.
Well,
And it will graphically discuss things with young children that young children don't need to know about.
and it could be that some of the redactions that I'm seeing right now in the AI chatbots that I use are there because of those situations, and the developers are saying, wait a minute, we need to be careful with what this can do. And it's something that's still very much in development and being experimented with, so there's a long way to go. Anyway, let's bow our heads. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for all your blessings. We thank you for life and for the health and strength that you've given us. And we thank you that you've given us intelligence and an ability to be curious and to find out about the world around us and about you. And tonight's search of the written word needs to be an opportunity for us to reach out to you and to make our relationship with you firmer and more secure and stable. send your Holy Spirit toward that end, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Yeah, our ability to have a relationship with God should not be based on our ability to buy a light bulb.
This is true. Very true.
Getting my snark back.
Okay, well, you may have cause to use it.
Okay.
We left off at verse 15 in Psalm 18 last week. And there was, let me read the last few verses just to remind us where we were. He shrouded himself in darkness, veiling his approach with dark rain clouds. Thick clouds shielded the brightness around him and rained down hail and burning coals. The Lord thundered from heaven. The voice of the Most High resounded amid the hail and burning coals.
Hey, turn off. Lord.
He shot his arrows and scattered his enemies. Great bolts of lightning flashed, and they were confused. Then at your command, O Lord, at the blast of your breath, the bottom of the sea could be seen, and the foundations of the earth were laid bare. Now, you could take this passage somewhat literally and make it sound like God is a frightening presence. Now, I think we mentioned last week that when God shrouds himself in darkness, that's for our protection. Because of his purity, his full glory is more than we faulty humans can bear. So he shrouds himself for our protection because he loves us. Now, if we get down here to verse 15, and we read that the bottom of the sea could be seen and the foundations of the earth were laid bare, recall again the ancient Middle East mythology surrounding the sea as the place of chaos, of the unknown, or of evil. And when you read this that way, then God lays bare the mechanisms of evil and lets us become aware of how destructive evil is so that we can then avoid it and avoid the associated destruction. And the very foundations of the earth are laid bare. God makes it so that we can see things as they really are. And getting us reconnected with reality is one way of protecting us. When the guy sticks his finger in the light socket and it hurts, he can get mad and blame the electric company. But if he figures out not to stick his finger in the light socket, then it quits hurting. And
if he lamps up under the shelf, he wouldn't even have to touch the light.
Are we going to hear about those under-shelf lamps all night?
Oh, yes.
Anyway, I've heard people, they go to court and they're blaming the court system for their ills, and we think, well, if they just stop running red lights or driving without a license or whatever it is they do that keeps getting them hauled off to court, they'd be free of these problems. And sometimes it's hard for humans to see their own agency in their pain. And it's very typical and human to want to blame other people for our problems rather than recognizing what we can do about the situation. Now, that's not necessarily to cast blame or to find fault. It may be that somebody's problems are not their fault, but they can't change the person they think that's causing their problems. But if they can find a change they can make that will alleviate their symptoms and their pain, they should do that. because that's something they can do rather than trying to change the other person, which is something that they ultimately can't do and morally shouldn't try to do. How'd I get off on that? Reading on then in Psalm 18, starting at verse 16. And, yes, it would help if you could read along with me. But since we haven't gotten to the new stuff, now you can see the new stuff. He reached down from heaven and rescued me. He drew me out of deep waters. He rescued me from my powerful enemies, from those who hated me and were too strong for me. They attacked me at a moment when I was in distress. But the Lord supported me. He led me to a place of safety. He rescued me because he delights in me. The Lord rewarded me for doing right. He restored me because of my innocence. For I have kept the ways of the Lord. I have not turned from my God to follow evil. I have followed all his regulations. I have never abandoned his decrees. I am blameless before God. I have kept myself from sin. The Lord rewarded me for doing right. He has seen my innocence. Now, in our modern cultural perspective, these verses sound like unconscionable arrogance. Paul made the point that all of us have done wrong. All of us have fallen short of God's glory. And so it's a little bit arrogant to be saying, I'm right, I'm innocent. But then, Job got away with that. So why shouldn't the psalmist? And when we get to Psalm 19, we're going to talk about this regulations and decrees stuff a little bit and try and set that in a context that we can understand better in our modern culture and religious setting.
Well, people act like me.
The unfortunate thing about that is that very often their problems are caused by people acting just like them.
Well, that comment totally turned me off on Paul, and I have not been able to get over it. And it's been years.
What comment is that?
I think he's an arrogant SOB.
Well, what did he say that made you think he was arrogant?
Act like me.
Oh. Well, he did qualify it by saying, as I act like Christ.
I didn't catch that.
Well, that is there. Anyway, reading on in Psalm 18. To the faithful, you show yourself faithful. To those with integrity, you show integrity. To the pure, you show yourself pure. But to the crooked, you show yourself shrewd. You rescue the humble, but you humiliate the proud. You light a lamp for me. The Lord my God lights up my darkness. In your strength I can crush an army. With my God I can scale any wall. Now again, this is the psalmist expressing his human approach to life, but then directing it toward God and using it to cement his relationship with God. God's way is perfect. All the Lord's promises prove true. He is a shield for all who look to him for protection. For who is God except Yahweh? Who but our God is a solid rock? God arms me with strength, and he makes my way perfect. He makes me as sure-footed as a deer, enabling me to stand on mountain heights. Now that brings to mind, and maybe they didn't have the term back then, so when he speaks of the deer, he might actually be speaking of what we would today call a mountain goat. Mountain goats will climb up steep rock sides using footholds we humans would have a hard time finding, And they do it without falling. They're sure-footed. And I think that may be the kind of image that the psalmist wants to elicit in our minds as he describes the confidence with which he can walk in God's way. Now, this next one will sound a little bit out of sorts in our modern culture. He trains my hands for battle. He strengthens my arm to draw a bronze bow. You have given me your shield of victory. Your right hand supports me. Your help has made me great. You have made a wide path for my feet to keep them from slipping. But recall, and let me look at the top again, this is a Psalm of David, and David was a warrior. So as a warrior, he would have, in his relationship with Yahweh, have seen God as a protector when he was in battle, and therefore giving him the strength to fight these battles. Verse 37. I chased my enemies and caught them. I did not stop until they were conquered. I struck them down so they could not get up. They fell beneath my feet. You have armed me with strength for the battle. You have subdued my enemies under my feet. You placed my foot on their necks. I have destroyed all who hated me. They called for help, but no one came to their rescue. They even cried to Yahweh, but he refused to answer. I ground them as fine as dust in the wind. I swept them into the gutter like dirt. You gave me victory over my accusers. You appointed me ruler over nations. People I don't even know now serve me. As soon as they hear of me, they submit. Foreign nations cringe before me. They all lose their courage and come trembling from their strongholds. And there is some truth in what David writes here, because he did become ruler over the widest extent of territory in Israelite history. And he attributed his success to God. Now, in our day, in our culture, we see this warlikeness and we say, that is not godlike. And I think we would be accurate to say so. But now let's take this metaphorically, because I think that's how we ought to understand it. Who are the enemies that God will help us subdue and put behind us and grind to dust so that they never come back to haunt us? Well, wouldn't that be the broken coping mechanisms and the mistakes and sins that have entrapped us? And when we come to God and he begins that work of character transformation, then we find it possible to give up those broken coping strategies and to place our trust in an all-loving God.
He reparents us.
He reparents us, exactly. And that's what Jesus meant when he said in John 3 to Nicodemus, you must be born from above. And we often translate it born again, but the meaning is born from above. Be reparented by the perfect parent, Yahweh, the God of heaven. So if we let him do that, then the enemies that have prevented us from thriving in life become defeated. We're not defeating human enemies. We're defeating the old ways of doing things that kept us trapped in broken and destructive behaviors. The Lord lives. Praise to my rock. May the God of my salvation be exalted. He is the God who pays back those who harm me. He subdues the nations under me and rescues me from my enemies. You hold me safe beyond the reach of my enemies. You save me from violent opponents. For this, O Lord, I will praise you among the nations. I will sing praises to your name. You give great victories to your king. You show unfailing love to your anointed, to David and all his descendants forever. Now, how is this talk about all David's descendants forever fulfilled? It's fulfilled in Jesus Christ, who came to this earth in the line of David. Now, this next psalm has two sections with two very distinct focuses or topics in mind. So let's read through them. Psalm 19 for the choir director, a psalm of David. And the first topic is one that we've run across already in an earlier psalm. We didn't talk about it much then, but we will now. Psalm 19:1, the heavens proclaim the glory of God, the skies display his craftsmanship. Now, we talked about that term, craftsmanship or workmanship, in our sermon on a passage from Ephesians over a month ago. Craftsmanship, workmanship, that is refers to the attention to detail and the determination to get all those little details right before you release the work. That's what we speak of when we talk about workmanship or craftsmanship. As an example, take Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. By the time he wrote that music, his hearing had pretty much left him. Now, one of the ways that a musician can experiment with music is to sit down at the piano and listen to various note combinations and try things that haven't been tried before and see how they sound. And when you find things that you like, then you can include them in new compositions. By the time Beethoven wrote the Ninth Symphony, he couldn't do that anymore. He couldn't hear well enough to really do that. But he still had his knowledge of music from all the work he'd done before, so he could still put down notes that sounded good together because he remembered from previous work what they were. And he also had his musical craftsmanship. And the third movement of the Ninth Symphony is the slow movement, and that's the one in a slow movement that a composer gets to bring out their most emotionally moving work, usually, to bring forth, emotions of devotion and of contentment and so forth. These things generally come out best in slow movements. The third movement, the slow movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, doesn't really do that. I'm not saying it doesn't do it at all, but it kind of leaves one feeling a little bit lacking. But when you listen to it carefully, what you find out is that Ludwig van Beethoven, with that music, was pulling out all the stops in his musical craftsmanship, making an absolute masterpiece of music, using the tools he still had at his disposal, which included particularly his musical craftsmanship. So now the psalmist looks up at the sky, usually at night, and he says, the skies display God's craftsmanship. We see his attention to detail, his commitment to getting everything right. And if you haven't done this, I would challenge you to do this sometime. I would like to find a time when I could do it again Right now, I don't think I could. But take some time when you have time off and go someplace that is of higher elevation. The higher the elevation, the better. And go out on a clear night and look up.
We used to could do that from our yard.
Yeah, the problem is when you live in or near a city, there's so much light pollution, you just don't get the effect.
We used to could do that from our yard before we moved here.
Well, yeah,
We could just step out on our porch and we saw was it the Hale-Bopp comet?
we probably did.
I got someone in trouble.
Do you know the event I'm thinking of right now, though?
Aurora?
Do you recall our 10th anniversary?
Oh yeah.
There were a lot of things going on then. It made our 10th anniversary exceptionally memorable. But one of them was we stayed at some cabins in the northern part of our state, the same ones that we had stayed at on our honeymoon. In fact, we got the exact same cabin. And at night, we went out on the road and looked up. And what you can see with a clear sky on a dark night out in the country like that will just blow you away. It really will.
Well, we were out in the country there at Mayo.
We were, and we could do that.
We could do that there, and I never figured out why when you look north at night, there was a white glow in the horizon. Winter and summer.
Still haven't figured it out?
Huh?
I saying you still haven't figured it out? Well, you know, and we didn't go out and look. I'm told that the aurora borealis was particularly bright about a week ago, and a lot of people were talking about how you can go out and see it from much farther south than normal. Anyway, we only read verse 1. Let's read verse 2. Day after day they continue to speak. Night after night they make him known. They speak without a sound or word. Their voice is never heard. Now, they've got a footnote there, and I think we ought to look it up, because the other interpretation of that is there is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. We all look up at the same sky. There's a song from a cartoon from about 30 or more years ago. Somewhere out there.
That was
What?
from a movie.
It was an animated movie.
Yeah.
And the idea was that even though the two were separated, they could go out at night and look up at the same sky and wish on the same star.
There are no pets in America, and the streets are paved with cheese.
Yeah. Anyway, the message of the stars translates into every language. I guess you could put it that way. Everybody can receive a message from them. And that's what the psalmist tells us here. He says, everybody can see God's craftsmanship in the stars. And if we are willing to take time and absorb it, we can receive a message of his constancy and his uh, of his of his creativity, but also of his vast power by contemplating the vastness of space as seen in all those stars up there.
You make me think of, I can't remember the name, but years ago I ran across a presentation by an astrophysicist, and he was traveling around. He worked for some company in Texas where they were studying the planet. He was traveling around proving the existence of God by using math.
Is that the one who was talking about fractals?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah. You used to have a link to his video on your web page. The link's probably broken by now, but
Yeah.
well, I'm going to read 3 and 4 again, the way it's worded in this version, just so we can get an idea of what these translators thought they saw here. They speak without a sound or word, their voice is never heard, yet their message has gone throughout the earth, and their words to all the world. God has made a home in the heavens for the sun. It bursts forth like a radiant bridegroom after his wedding. It rejoices like a great athlete eager to run the race. The sun rises at one end of the heavens and follows its course to the other end. Nothing can hide from its heat. And a version of those words, probably from the Luther Bible, got set to music by none other than Ludwig van Beethoven. I'm not going to go dig the music book out right now, but anyway, the music is pretty grandiose, and it makes quite a big deal about the sun coming out like a hero strong to run the race.
Attackers are wanting my password for invaindotheyworshipme.com.
Well, don't give it to them.
I don't have one. I'm just trying to log on.
Oh. Well, the problem is that our subscription to any web development tools have lapsed, and you can only download the files as they are. You don't have Weebly anymore, so it would be virtually impossible for you to edit it if you did get in.
Well, yeah. I'm not trying to get in. I'm just trying to look for that link.
Well, anyway. Now, the here at verse 6, at the end of verse 6, the psalmist changes topics entirely. Verse 7, the instructions of the Lord are perfect, reviving the soul. The decrees of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. The commandments of the Lord are right, bringing joy to the heart. The commands of the Lord are clear, giving insight for living. Reverence for Yahweh is pure, lasting forever. The laws of the Lord are true, each one is fair. They are more desirable than gold, even the finest gold. They are sweeter than honey, even honey dripping from the comb. They are a warning to your servant, a great reward for those who obey them. How can I know all the sins lurking in my heart? Cleanse me from these hidden faults. Keep your servant from deliberate sins. Don't let them control me. Then I will be free of guilt and innocent of great sin. Now, this is a section that is easily misused, particularly by people at the lower levels of moral development who see the Ten Commandments as a list of inviolable rules. Now, we look at God's law and we say God's law is a law in principle, not in written rules. God's law is, quite frankly, the principles around which life is designed to operate. And just like, and for the fun of it, let's just minimize this window for a second so you can see the bumper sticker on my desktop here, because this has to do with what I'm talking about. God's moral law is very much like, and is in fact, natural law, just like the laws of physics. Now, this bumper sticker is kind of making a little fun because we talk about the law of gravity, so it says obey gravity. It's the law. Well, guess what? It is not possible to disobey the law of gravity. You can act out of harmony with the law of gravity, say, for example, stepping out of a window on the 34th floor of a New York City skyscraper. That's acting out of harmony with the law of gravity, but you won't break the law of gravity. Gravity will take over and it will have its natural result. And since you have acted out of harmony with it, the result for you probably won't be very good. Okay? Now, if we understand God's moral law, in that way, then it takes a very different approach than when we look at God's law as the written Ten Commandments, a list of rules with which you must comply. Rules, written rules, are blind and they are not compassionate. God's law is not blind and it is compassionate. It can meet us where we are. And a lot of even modern theology revolves around the idea that God's law is a list of rules that he requires us to comply with, and that he will punish us for not complying with. And in the minds of a lot of religious people, God's justice demands that he punish those who violate his law. But when you understand God's moral law as natural law, then you see that the consequences for violating God's moral law are just as natural as the consequences for acting out of harmony with the law of gravity. Reality catches up with you, and God doesn't have to be angry at you for the bad thing to happen. It's just the natural result of the choices and actions you have engaged. And in that light, then, if we go back and we read this passage, the instructions of the Lord, that is his natural moral law, that is perfect, and it revives the soul. These decrees are trustworthy. They make the simple wise. When we operate on the principle of selfless, unconditional love, then we do the right thing by nature, not by, I've thought this through for 5 days and this is the decision I've come up with. We don't have to go through that kind of nonsense. The commandments of the Lord are right, bringing joy to the heart, because life goes better when we live in harmony with natural law. The commandments of the Lord are clear, giving insight for living. If God has transformed our characters, or at least if He's in that process, then doing the right thing isn't a matter of reading 110 rule books trying to figure out how to apply them to this situation. It's simply a matter of doing what comes naturally because we've been fixed, and what comes naturally is the right thing. Reverence for Yahweh is pure, lasting forever. The laws of God are true, each one is fair. Well, that's just the nature of natural law. Gravity treats everybody the same. A person who jumps off a platform at a given height falls to the ground at the same rate as any other person jumping off a platform from that height. Perfectly fair, even, and equal. That's the nature of natural law. And when we speak of God's law as unchanging, it's not like the laws of the Medes and Persians, which can't be changed, which we read about in books like Daniel and Esther. It's like, well, scientists tell us that if the value of gravity should change by even 1/10 of 1%, life would no longer be possible. If God's natural moral law were to change at all, life would no longer be possible. So when people say God couldn't change His law to meet humanity in its fallen condition, He's not talking about an arbitrary bureaucratic thing. It's talking about the very fundamental naturalness of natural law. That's just how natural law works. The laws of the Lord are more desirable than gold, even the finest gold. They are sweeter than honey, even honey dripping from the comb. They are a warning to your servant, a great reward for those who obey them. Well, of course, life goes better when you live in harmony with the foundational principles that make life possible. That's just simple reality. There's no mysticism or anything unusual about that. Now, there are other places we will encounter in the Psalms, including the entire longest psalm, Psalm 119, that talk about the law. But again, let's understand it in a proper light. But let's also look at it from David's perspective. As we went through the historical parts of the Old Testament, we noted how dispensing civil justice was a major role for the leaders. And so in the book of Judges, it talks about the judges and the judges judge. Well, that was one of the things they had to do, was to hear people's quarrels and complaints and make decisions about the right way to dispense things. Brings to mind some recent court cases out of Travis County, Texas. Travis County is the county that contains the Texas state capital, Austin. And there was a civil court case in landlord-tenant court where a woman was trying to evict her brother from the house that they shared. Now, that may not sound all that unusual, but it turns out that they were both in the same area and they were getting feedback because they had two devices in the same area and each device could hear the other device. It was making problems, so the judge had the woman go to another place. The man was able to get his video going because he had a young man there to work the phone for him and get him hooked up so that they could be seen and could see. And the woman didn't have anybody to do that for her, so you couldn't see her and she couldn't see the judge. But the interesting thing was, and my wife and I both laughed at this conversation, at some point the young man pointed out that this guy here owns the house. She's just the tenant. And she immediately cut in and said, "What do you mean I'm just the tenant? I am the tenant." Well, it turns out her brother owned the house and she was living there rent free. And her brother hadn't decided to evict anybody. And the woman, the sister, didn't have any ownership interest in the house. Well, of course, the judge then dismissed the case. The owner of the house didn't file to have anybody evicted, so there's no eviction case to carry on. It made the woman upset, but that's the kind of weird things that our courts deal with, and that's the kind of things that would have come before the judges. We read the story of Moses and how he was overwhelmed by all the people coming to him for decisions, and how his father-in-law said, "Hey, look, you can't do all this. You need to deputize people to help you out with this and have only the hardest cases be brought to you." When we get to the time of David, David was, you might think of it as the top judge. Any things that couldn't be dealt with lower down in the governmental hierarchy would come to him. Now, in that context, can you see how a man like David might look at law as a big benefit? Because it helped him know how to deal with these situations. And judges in our day and time very often rely on a knowledge of the law and will even press the attorneys bringing cases before them. What is the law on this? And then when the attorney cites a law, they'll look it up and read it for themselves and use it as a guide to make a decision in the cases brought before them. So David's fealty, if you wish, to the law is a very understandable thing given his position and his responsibilities. Now then, the last few verses of this psalm, these are also familiar for most of us. They've been put to music in different ways. Now, I've read 12 and 13 from this version. Let me read it from the New International Version. Who can discern his errors? Forgive my hidden faults. Keep your servant also from willful sins. May they not rule over me, then will I be blameless, innocent of great transgression. And then finally, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Well, how can we know that our words and thoughts will be pleasing to the Creator? We can know if we have trusted Him enough to let Him begin the work of character transformation, because then what comes forth naturally conforms to the reality in which God lives and becomes pleasing to Him. Okay. Psalm 20. I wonder if we're going to get to 23. That might be nice to end on. For the choir director, a psalm of David. In times of trouble, may Yahweh answer your cry. May the name of the God of Jacob keep you safe from all harm. May He send you help from His sanctuary and strengthen you from Jerusalem, or Zion. Zion was a term that the psalmist frequently used to refer to Jerusalem. May He remember all your gifts and look favorably on your burnt offerings. Selah. May He grant your heart's desires and make all your plans succeed. May we shout for joy when we hear of your victory and raise a victory banner in the name of our God. May the Lord answer all your prayers. Well, what victory do we need in our day and time? Is it not victory over the broken coping mechanisms that we developed as a result of abuse in childhood that make us toxic to other people and that make our lives less fulfilled and pleasing to us? Aren't those the things that we would like to have victory over? And would we not like to raise a victory banner over those things in the name of God? Then may the Lord answer all your prayers. Now I know that the Lord rescues his anointed king. He will answer him from his holy heaven and rescue him by his great power. Some nations boast of their chariots and horses, but we boast in the name of Yahweh our God. Those nations will fall down and collapse, but we will rise up and stand firm. Give victory to our King, O Lord. Answer our cry for help. And, we look at the military references here and we cringe a little bit. But look at it from the viewpoint of a typical Israelite in the time of King David. King David's victories meant that nobody came to harass them and steal their flocks and their crops, and maybe to steal their sons and daughters and turn them into slaves. These were dangers and harms that David's victories freed them from. And so they might very well go to the temple and sing, "Give victory to our King, O Lord, answer our cry for help." That the king was who they looked to for protection from these outside enemies that wished them harm. Psalm 21, for the choir director, a psalm of David. How the king rejoices in your strength, O Lord. He shouts with joy because you give him victory. Something tells me. Okay, well, we're at large. That's extra large might be a little bit overkill here. I was thinking it was looking a little bit small, but I guess this is roughly what we're used to. How the king rejoices in your strength, O Lord. He shouts with joy because you give him victory. For you have given him his heart's desire. You have withheld nothing he requested. Interlude. You welcomed him back with success and prosperity. You placed a crown of finest gold on his head. He asked you to preserve his life, and you granted his request. The days of his life stretch on forever. Now, let's understand this in the context of David's history. Recall that David had spent, at least 10 years running from his father-in-law and employer, King Saul, a man who kept making peace with David and then getting a mean spirit and going out again trying to kill him. This is the context of much of David's life, and it is a background to help us understand what he means when he talks about receiving his heart's desire. How he now has been welcomed back with success and prosperity. how God preserved his life. And now the days of his life stretch on forever. There's no King Saul out there anymore to threaten it. Your victory brings him great honor, and you have clothed him with splendor and majesty. You have endowed him with eternal blessings and given him the joy of your presence. And I think you might see here that David is looking beyond the temporal here and now success that he had as the ruler of Israel, and seeing eternity and getting that in a perspective. And so then he can say, you have endowed him with eternal blessings and given him the joy of your presence. For the king trusts in the Lord. The unfailing love of the Most High will keep him from stumbling. You will capture all your enemies. Your strong right hand will seize all who hate you. You will throw them in a flaming furnace when you appear. The Lord will consume them in his anger. Fire will devour them. Well, this is a verse that those who preach an eternally burning hell would love to get their hands on. Yeah, God throws them in there and fire will devour them. And God's angry and he's going to get you. Well, to a certain extent, that was the viewpoint of the Hebrews. God's anger was their protection because it was directed at their enemies. You will wipe their children from the face of the earth. They will never have descendants. Although they plot against you, their evil schemes will never succeed, for they will turn and run when they see your arrows aimed at them. Rise up, O Lord, in all your power. With music and singing, we celebrate your mighty acts. Psalm 22, for the choir director, a psalm of David, to be sung to the tune, Doe of the Dawn. And let me just see that here in the NIV. Oh, to the tune of the Doe of the Morning is how they put it. And then a psalm of David. They rearranged it a little bit, but yeah. Now, this psalm has often been seen as a messianic prophecy. And indeed, there are words here that Jesus quoted from the cross. There are other words here that have been applied to the mistreatment of Jesus during his arrest, trial, and ultimate execution. And it is not wrong to see this psalm in that way, as long as we understand that that may not be what David had in mind as he penned these words. My God, why have you abandoned me? Why are you so far away when I groan for help? Every day I call to you, my God, but you do not answer. Every night I lift my voice, but I find no relief. And given the darkness of the world we live in, giving the lies directed toward us by religious leaders all around us, it's not surprising that we might come to points in our lives where this is our experience, where we don't feel that we can find God, where we end up crying out, where are you? Why can't I find you? Why aren't you helping when I need you the most? Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you rescued them. They cried out to you and were saved. They trusted in you and were never disgraced. But I am a worm and not a man. I am scorned and despised by all. Everyone who sees me mocks me. They sneer and shake their heads, saying, is this the one who relies on Yahweh? Then let Yahweh save him. If the Lord loves him so much, let Yahweh rescue him. And interestingly enough, and this is probably not a coincidence at all, because certainly the Pharisees of Jesus' day, who were standing there watching him die, knew this psalm probably by memory. So when they hear Jesus using this first verse, my God, why have you abandoned me? Or Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, in the Aramaic. When they heard that, they wanted to double down on their derision of him, and so they went down here to verse 8, and they quoted verse 8 back to him. Let me look that up. I think we will find that interaction in Matthew, just to see how Matthew words it. Okay, I'm reading from Matthew chapter 27. This is starting at verse 45. From the 6th hour until the 9th hour, darkness came over all the land. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of those standing there heard this, they said, He's calling Elijah. Now, in Matthew, it's in a little bit different order, because to hear the verse 8 stuff used, it says in verse 41, in the same way the chief priests and the teachers of the law and the elders mocked him. He saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. He's the king of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross and we'll believe in him. Well, they wouldn't have, even if he had. But, they could say that because they were pretty sure he wasn't going to. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now, if he wants him. For he said, I am the Son of God. So, yeah, now that I find interesting. I hadn't realized it was in that order. But they actually quote that, according to Matthew, earlier. And then Jesus goes back to the beginning of the psalm to express his distress just before his death. Yet you brought me safely from my mother's womb and led me to trust you at my mother's breast. I was thrust into your arms at my birth. You have been my God from the moment I was born. Do not stay so far from me, for trouble is near, and no one else can help me. My enemies surround me like a herd of bulls. Fierce bulls of Bashan have hemmed me in. Like lions, they open their jaws against me, roaring and tearing into their prey. My life is poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax melting within me. My strength has dried up like sun-baked clay. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You have laid me in the dust and left me for dead. My enemies surround me like a pack of dogs. An evil gang closes in on me. They have pierced my hands and feet. I can count all my bones. My enemies stare at me and gloat. They divide my garments among themselves and throw dice for my clothing. Well, it is easy to see the final hours of Jesus reflected in this passage, where Jesus' most loyal friends forsake him and flee. His most vocal disciple loudly denies that he knows him. And everybody is jeering at them and twisting his words and being cruelly sarcastic and heaping verbal abuse on him, along with all the physical abuse that he's undergoing, because the Romans had no qualms in abusing people physically. That's how you maintain control in the Roman Empire. And so you could very easily see Jesus thinking of his enemies surrounding him like a pack of dogs, that an evil gang was closing in on him, and they very literally pierced his hands and feet. His enemies did stare at him and gloat. And, according to the gospel writers, the soldiers who crucified him divided his garments among themselves, and even when they came to the seamless cloak, decided not to try and divide it and cast lots to decide who would get it. They threw dice for my clothing. O Lord, do not stay far away. You are my strength. Come quickly to my aid. Save me from the sword. Spare my precious life from these dogs. Snatch me from the lion's jaws and from the horns of these wild oxen. And there are senses in which God did exactly that for David. But he didn't for Jesus. And that made Jesus' sacrifice possible and made our salvation and restoration to what God designed us to be to begin with. It made that possible. I will proclaim your name to my brothers and sisters. I will praise you among your assembled people. Praise the Lord, all you who fear him. Honor him, all you descendants of Jacob. Show him reverence, all you descendants of Israel. For he has not ignored or belittled the suffering of the needy. He has not turned his back on them, but has listened to their cries for help. I will praise you in the great assembly. I will fulfill my vows in the presence of those who worship you. The poor will eat and be satisfied. All who seek Yahweh will praise him. Their hearts will rejoice with everlasting joy. The whole earth will acknowledge the Lord and return to him. All the families of the nations will bow down before him. And this is a thought that Paul drew from in his poem in Philippians, when he talks about the humiliation and then the elevation of Christ, to the point where every knee would bow and every tongue confess. That's the very same thought that David expresses here in these words. For royal power belongs to Yahweh. He rules all the nations. Let the rich of the earth feast and worship. Bow before him all who are mortal, all whose lives will end as dust. Our children will also serve him. Future generations will hear about the wonders of Yahweh. His righteous acts will be told to those not yet born. They will hear about everything he has done. Now, we've got about 10 minutes left. I don't know that we're going to take 10 minutes on this psalm, but I think it might be a good psalm to end with, even if we don't fill up all our time, because of the serene presence of this, the comforting notions behind these words. And let's recall again David's history, both among the Egyptians, and he kind of rubbed off onto the Hebrews from the Egyptians. there was a sense that animal herders were the lowest form of human life. That was certainly true in Jesus' day, and it was those lowly ones, those despised animal herders, who came at the behest of the angels and visited the newborn Christ.
How do you spell astrophysicist?
What'd you say?
How do you spell astrophysicist?
ASTROPHYSICIST.
Okay.
I didn't write it down and read it, but that sounds right. By the way, people, there is no correlation between intelligence and ability to spell. So her asking me how to spell a word doesn't make me any smarter than her. There's no correlation, all right? Just know that.
I want to do this as medical transcriptionist. I can spell. But what I did just didn't look right.
So, because he was the youngest of 8 boys, the unwanted job of tending the family's flocks fell to David. Yeah. And David didn't take offense at the role assigned to him. Instead, he learned from it. And those memories come back to him as a poet king. And he writes these words: Yahweh is my shepherd. I have all that I need. Now, just a word here about evolution. We know that evolution, and particularly now that we know about epigenetics, and that genetic changes can take place in just a few generations and not over long eras of time, as scientists used to think, then we understand that evolution has been taking place in this world from the time of Adam and Eve forward. And evolution has done its work on those species that have to fend for themselves. But species, and this includes both flora and fauna, species that humans found useful received the protection of their human overseers, and evolution did not play as big a role in their development. So now you have an animal like a cow, which we tend to for both milk and for meat, and we keep them in barns, we feed them. They don't have to do a whole lot in order to survive. So there have not been the evolutionary pressure on cows that there have been on a lot of other animals. And one of the shocking results of that is that cows aren't afraid of fire. If their barn catches fire and nobody's there to do anything about it, they'll stand there and burn to death. And so, if you see a barn fire, you'll see people making a very strident efforts to get in there and to get any cattle in that barn out. You have to do that because they won't take themselves out of harm's way. They're not afraid of fire. Now, you take the sheep. The sheep is another animal that humans have been raising. Well, you read about it in the book of Genesis and the story of Cain and Abel. So humans were keeping sheep that far back. So a sheep also have not had the benefits of evolutionary pressures, and they are highly reliant on their human overseers for everything they need. And so David says, Yahweh, the Creator, is my shepherd. So I don't have to fight for what I need. He provides it. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. Well, that's interesting, and people have pointed this out. The text in Proverbs that gets rather roughly rendered as spare the rod and spoil the child. Maybe we need to understand the rod there in this context. Does the rod used to strike a child on the behind protect and comfort the child? Well, here the psalmist says, your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. And some people have suggested that maybe what the writer of Proverbs was trying to say with that is to be your child's protector, or things will not go well with your child.
Maybe a study into the text would be beneficial, because I studied into it and found that the rod was what the ruler used in order to govern. He didn't use it, he used it to govern.
Okay. Reading on.
Don't guide your child in the proper way, that child's going to end up a man.
And the best way to guide your child is to model appropriate behavior for your child.
The worst way to govern your child is to hit him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of Yahweh the Creator forever. That ought to be comforting. Because if you take out a lot of extraneous words there, that last sentence says, I will live forever. And if that's not good enough, we will live in the house of the Creator, in His way, in the lifestyle that He designed us to live in, which is commensurate with reality and brings joy and peace and all these things. That's how we will live forever. It won't be boring, by the way. God's goodness and unfailing love will pursue me. That's interesting wording. Usually we use the more common follow me. I kind of like that. God doesn't just follow us around. He pursues us. He's doing everything He can to convince us to come to Him and receive the wonderful blessings He wants to give us.
Don't question if He's with you. Just believe that He is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Even if you can't experience His presence, if you can't feel it, know that He's there.
Yeah.
He's
Well,
taking a lot of the pressures off of you, pressures that you can't handle. He's handling it for you.
well, our time is up.
I found a link. I haven't watched it, and it's the newer presentation, but it looks like the same guy. His name is Jason Lisle, Lisle. He's an astrophysicist, and he does a presentation using fractals to prove the presence of God. And I put a link on the bottom, just underneath your video there.
Did you put it in as a comment on the video?
I placed a link. I haven't watched it to know what it's like, so watch it at your own risk.
Okay. Well, that's something that, people might find interesting. And so thank you for posting that for us. By the way, you didn't hear her, but she did confirm that she did put the link in the comments on this video. So if you want to find that and look it up and see it for yourself, that's where you'll find the link.
I need some tech support from you because there's a problem with the website.
Yeah, well, we may have to.
I think the problem is my Google.
Well, I'll look. We may need to invest in some kind of web development tool to do something with that site because we haven't done anything at all with it for nearly a year and very little for the few years before that. So
I don't have the strength anymore to do.
well, it might behoove us if we want that to be a useful resource and have anything at all that's up to date, find a way to do that.
One is my browser absolutely refused to let me log on to the website because hackers might be trying to steal my password to get onto the website, and I don't ask for password. I don't request cookies. Now the site may be requesting cookies, but I don't collect them. I have no business knowing what they are. I don't ask any information at all from anybody that visits. So there should not be any issue as to logging on and looking at what's there. But the browser wouldn't let me even load up the website.
Well,
I did get on. It's throwing in HTTPS. And I went up and typed in HTTP //www. Typed the whole thing and got in that way. It was like, the link is not there on that website.
okay.
So I even was able to remember his name and found the link.
Okay. Well, we need to stop. We're well over our time here, and we can come back again next week and continue with Psalm 24. By the way, next week, somebody might have to remind me, but I want to talk about an interesting connection between Psalm 22, Psalm 23, and Psalm 24. We haven't read 24 yet, so we'll have to wait till we get to 24, and then we can talk about that. So that's something to look forward to next week. So we invite you to join us next week. And until then, we say goodbye and God bless.
Bye.